The Vanier Cup is an all-Canadian game featuring intense rivalries, quality football, and homegrown players. For some of them, Saturday's game marks the end of their football careers. Others have professional ambitions, and for a Canadian university player, that most often means the CFL. But for how much longer? The Canadian quarterback has already become a player of the past in the CFL, with one third-string exception out west. Now, with the emphasis on expanding the CFL to the U.S., the rules requiring teams to dress Canadian players for every game will almost certainly be altered. We will ask two CFL hopefuls about that a bit later. We'll also talk with a former top Canadian university quarterback who never really got a chance in the CFL, but we begin with a man who did.
You know, it's impossible to talk about great CFL quarterbacks without talking about Russ Jackson. He took the Ottawa Rough Riders to the Grey Cup 4 times in the 1960s, winning 3 of them, including his farewell game in 1969. Jackson was the last Canadian quarterback to be a standout in the CFL. Nowadays, the big names, they always come from the United States. And that despite the fact the CFL has Canadian content rules in place to keep teams from filling entire rosters with American talent. There are 3 main categories for players: imports, non-imports, and quarterbacks. And the result? Well, most teams decide to go with 3 American quarterbacks. Had the rules been different, well, Chris Flynn might be a quarterback in the CFL today. You see, he was an outstanding Canadian college quarterback for the St. Mary's Huskies. He won the Heck Creighton Award 3 times as the most outstanding college player in the country before he graduated in 1990. Flynn's quarterback coach at St. Mary's was Bill Robinson, himself a former Canadian quarterback in the CFL and a man who believed Flynn could play in the big leagues.
I personally feel, having coached him for the last 2.5 years, that he certainly can play in the Canadian Football League and be as good as any player I've seen that play in that league. And I've played with people like Conrad Holloway and Tommy Clements. Athletic-wise, he is as good an athlete. He can throw the ball as well. He just needs some additional conditioning and training, and he certainly could be a player like the Russ Jacksons of the 60s.
After his career at St. Mary's, Flynn spent 2 years with the Montreal Machine of the World League of American Football. He was then invited to the Ottawa Rough Riders training camp. However, they weren't thinking of him as a quarterback.
I'd just like to get a chance at quarterback, and I hope things will work out. But if things don't work out and I move to receiver, I feel pretty confident that I can play at that position.
Flynn never made it to the CFL. However, there is one Canadian quarterback who has. Bob Torrance plays, very infrequently mind you, for the Calgary Stampeders. He spends most of his time toiling in the shadow of superstar Doug Flutie. In 2 seasons on the Calgary roster, Torrance has thrown just 4 passes, completing 3 of them. Now, nobody can argue with the success of Doug Flutie in the CFL. However, sometimes the high-priced American talent turns out to be more of a problem than a solution. Vince Ferragamo, remember him? Didn't turn out to be the savior the Montreal Alouettes hoped he would be. This weekend in Toronto, 2 Canadian quarterbacks, Tim Pendergast of Queens and David Sykes of St. Mary's, will lead their college teams onto the field to fight for the Vanier Cup. And with so few opportunities in the CFL, college football may be as far as they go. And quarterback may not be the only dead-end position at the college level in this country, because CFL expansion seems inevitable now. And one of the questions yet to be answered is what happens to Canadian content rules when you have teams in cities such as Portland and Sacramento. The CFL's answer so far is, we're studying that. For TSN Inside Sports, I'm Vic Rowden.
The CFL has plenty of star quarterbacks, past and present. Joe Theismann, Warren Moon, Doug Flutie. You've no doubt got your own list, and if you're old enough to remember him, Russ Jackson's name is almost certainly on it. But he is one thing those other names are not. He's Canadian. So is Jamie Bone, but he's on a different list. Star quarterback in Canadian college ranks, never a quarterback in the CFL. Russ Jackson speaks to us now from Mississauga. Jamie Bone is in Toronto. Russ, provide us with a bit of historical perspective to begin with, if you please. When you entered the CFL as an Ottawa Rough Rider, did you walk into a spot saved for a Canadian quarterback, or did you have roughly the same trouble that Canadian quarterbacks have always had?
Dave, I think I had the same trouble Canadian quarterbacks always had, because when I walked into Ottawa in 1958, they had 2 American quarterbacks, Hal Ledyard and Tom Dimitrov. And both these quarterbacks actually were on the active roster neither of them played defense, so one of them actually sat on the bench. So they were content to give up 2 of the American spots to the quarterback position. And I went there as a quarterback and a defensive back and did play some quarterback in the exhibition schedule, but actually started the season making the team as a defensive back and only got a chance to play after Dimitrov and Ledyard got injured.
That and your talent gave you the break.
Well, I think so. I think I always say I was in the right place at the right time because, as you know, I tried to get traded back to Hamilton desperately that year, having come from Hamilton, and might have sat like Frank Cosentino did for many years behind Bernie Filoni and never had that opportunity to even show that you did have the talent.
Jamie, you would suggest there was not an opportunity of any kind for you.
Well, that's right. I think at that time there was a designated import rule was in place, and that rule was enacted after Russ Jackson retired. And the rule was brought in primarily because they wanted to ensure that there were 2 quality quarterbacks on each roster, and by quality at that time they meant imports. And so consequently, the way the rules were structured, you had to have 14 Americans were starting. You had to have 1 sitting on the bench. The only way you could freely substitute them is if he was a quarterback. It encouraged teams, or teams saw that it was to their advantage to have 2 import quarterbacks. All I ever really wanted when I went to the CFL was something that Russ had, the chance to compete fairly against Americans.
Well, you said it one way, I'll say it another. The CFL has long been afraid of Canadian quarterbacks, as if they're on the roster and you have to play them, the league is going to suffer. And that suggests that every American quarterback we've ever seen here is a terrific player.
Well, I think that's true, Dave, and I think that Frank Cosentino, who I'm sure Russ knows quite well, played it around the same time period as Russ. You know, he talked about an unintentional bias that coaches have in the Canadian Football League. He says, for example, Russ Jackson coming out of McMaster University, as opposed to a player coming out of the University of Florida. More times than not, the coach in the CFL is usually familiar with the guy coming out of the University of Florida, knows his coach, knows the caliber of competition. But when Russ Jackson goes to a CFL team, they really don't know much about McMaster. They don't know the kind of league that he's played in. They don't know what kind of a player Russ Jackson is. So when you have 2 people competing for the same job, when Russ Jackson makes a mistake, all it does is reinforce the doubts that the coach already has about Russ Jackson. When the kid from the University of Florida makes a mistake, the coach views it as a learning experience. He's got to gain experience. He's going to make mistakes along the way, and we'll be patient with him. Unfortunately, they don't seem to be as patient with Canadians at that position.
Russ, how much do you think the CFL could benefit if Canadian quarterbacks were given a chance?
Well, Dave, there's no question that if you could put a Canadian in the quarterback position, it would enhance the entire league. Not just the team they play for, and not just the city they play for, but I think that when Russ Jackson played quarterback, through the 60s specifically, I think it helped the entire league. I think that Canadians were proud that there was a Canadian playing that position, whether it was Russ Jackson or anybody else. But I think it is important, and if they could ever get a couple of Canadians starting at quarterback, I think it would do nothing but improve the status of the league and make people really proud of Canadian football and Canadian football players.
Did you feel a tremendous frustration when you were a coach in this league, wishing to advance the cause of a Canadian quarterback, but simply not having the rules that allowed you to do that?
Well, I don't think I felt the frustration. I think that the rules, as Jamie said, were there for a reason. They were there to ensure that all teams carried 2 what they thought were top-flight quarterbacks. But I advocated all the way through that particular time and before I became a coach that we should have had a designated Canadian rule where every team could keep a Canadian quarterback on the roster above and beyond the usual total number of players. And this would give them an opportunity to keep a Canadian around, to let them develop, and maybe get that opportunity that I had when injuries prevailed.
Or Jamie, how would you like this? 17 imports, 20 non-imports, and if you wanted to keep a Canadian quarterback, you could put an import at another position.
Well, I think that's what it used to be like at one time, and I think what happened is that the reason they brought in the designated import rule is because the Russ Jackson, Frank Cosentinos were gone, and they felt that, boy, you know, if we make sure we want to play all of our imports, if we have a backup Canadian playing quarterback and our starting import gets hurt and an incapable Canadian has to go in and play, the level of the game will suffer. Because they didn't feel that at that time that the coach of the CFL club would in fact keep an American sitting on the bench because they thought he might be too valuable, and they didn't want the coach to take the chance, and that's why the league brought in that rule. I think all the Canadians can ask for, and I agree with Russ in this regard, that it would be nice to have, now each team does have 3 quarterbacks in the roster, it would be nice to have at least one of them being a Canadian.
If the league expands south of the border, is the Canadian quarterback deader than dead? Can you go lower than nil?
It's tough to say. You know, when I look at expansion, they talk about the roster quotas. Everybody's saying it's a fait accompli that Canadians can't play in that league. The U.S. wouldn't accept it. Maybe people should talk to immigration in the United States and say, listen, we're coming down there, we'll have a 20 Canadians, 20 Americans, and we're going to be increasing the job market for American football players down there, plus all your front office staff. I don't think it's fait accompli at all. I think they should talk to immigration and say, we're going to be creating jobs for you as long as we can have some jobs for Canadians as well.
Jamie and Russ, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Wally Buono, himself a former CFL player, now coaches the Calgary Stampeders. He also happens to have on his roster, lo and behold, a Canadian quarterback, Bob Torrance, who graduated from the University of Calgary. Wally Buono speaks to us now from McMahon Stadium in Calgary. Wally, why Bob Torrance? Is he the best third quarterback you could find or the best Canadian quarterback you could find?
Well, I think you have to say both issues. Bob was a quarterback that we thought had a lot of skills, and he does throw the ball very well. The thing that we wanted to do with Bob was give him the experience that maybe he lacked and he obviously needed. And the 2 years that he's been with us, he's made some tremendous progress, and we see a future for him.
I guess the question that the skeptics would ask is if you had an injury to one of your other two quarterbacks and you had a week to get ready for a game, would you bring somebody else in from the U.S. or would Bob Torrance have a chance to be number 2 or number 1?
Well, I would say right now he'd at least be number 2. We feel very confident with Bob. He has a good grasp of our offense. He's got a lot better skills, I think, than most people really know about him. And he's a competitor. He wants to do well, and I think he's paying the price for it.
Would it help the league, and we're talking about a league that is struggling with the idea of expansion now, would it help the league from this point forward, and could it have helped the league in past years if more Canadian quarterbacks had been given the opportunity that Torrance has had there?
Well, I think opportunity is based on skills and what kind of potential you have for the future. As you know, there are a lot of good college Canadian quarterbacks, as there is a lot of good American college quarterbacks. But to make the next jump is very difficult, and few players have that kind of capability. We feel Bob is one. Obviously, if you get a home-grown quarterback like a Russ Jackson, he does create a lot of interest, and he does have a lot of fan support. But again, I think the essential thing is whether he has the skill or the potential skill to be a CFL quarterback.
Well, I guess the argument has been that it's impossible to find out if those skills can't be developed. You are saying that you've seen development in Bob Torrance simply for giving him the chance.
Well, that's right. Like I say, Bob's always had a strong arm, but being a strong arm quarterback isn't the only thing that's important. The thought process, the handling of a team, the handling of the pressure, your own ambitions. Sometimes a player doesn't have the drive or the competitiveness to really work at his trade to become a CFL quarterback. And, you know, Bob has been very patient. He works extremely hard. And I think down deep he wants it real bad.
Do you think the fans want to see Canadian quarterbacks? You can remember Jerry DiTilio, and I think it's fair to say people pulled for him. They wanted to see him do well, if for no other reason than he was a Canadian quarterback. Do you think that the fans still are of that belief?
Oh, I think the fans are, but when it comes Sunday afternoon and we're going to play Edmonton for the Western Final, I don't really think they care who's going to take the snap, as long as the guy taking the snaps allows your chances to win. So initially, you know, that has a lot of value, but when it's all said and done, they want the best guy out there that would lead your team to victory.
What about good Canadian players at other positions? If the league expands to 4 more teams, so 3 of them in the U.S., what percentage of the Canadian players in the league now do you think would still be in the league?
Oh, I think right now there'd be still quite a large percentage. You look at the Elbergs, the Sapunjuses, the Averas, the Climies. Those guys are quality players. The thing that's allowed them to really develop is that they've had the opportunity to compete at this level against quality players, and they themselves have developed their skills. Expansion doesn't mean that there won't be any Canadians in the league. I think expansion might have a slightly different slant, and it might have a slightly different flavor as how your non-imports are developed. But again, I think we need not be afraid of expansion, only because if we're afraid to take a chance, then we're afraid also to succeed.
Running back Brad Elberg of the Queens Golden Gales and linebacker Alex Eliopoulous of the St. Mary's Huskies are two of the top players in the Canadian University ranks and thus future CFL prospects, you would think. Elberg is a nominee for the Heck Crichton Trophy awarded to the nation's outstanding player, and Eliopoulous is in the running for the President's Trophy, which goes to the top defensive player. They'll find out about those awards tonight. They'll meet Saturday afternoon for the Vanier Cup, and the question for this show is, will they ever face each other in a CFL game? Brad Elberg and Alex Eliopoulous from the Skydome. Fellas, I know the main focus right now is Saturday's Vanier Cup game, but I'm wondering how much talk there is of possible CFL expansion in your respective dressing rooms. Alex, are the St. Mary's Huskies preoccupied with the game, or do you talk about what might lie ahead in the CFL?
Right now, what we're talking about and thinking about is the game on Saturday, and everyone's focusing on this game on Saturday.
What if the CFL expands? Can it hurt your chances for a pro career?
To tell you the truth, I don't know if it does. I think it might give some kids from Canada a better of a chance to make the CFL. But how much more, I don't know.
Well, there would be more teams, and I guess that means more spots. The question is, would the coaches and managers of those teams be looking at Canadians? Brad, what about with Queens? Is this something you guys talk about?
Well, this is a big football week, so we've been talking about it a bit. I think, first of all, obviously we're focused on the game, but I disagree with Alex. I would think that would pretty much end if we expanded to the States and weren't able to keep the Canadian to homebrew ratio, the homebrew to import ratio the same. I think that would pretty much be the end of the Canadian game and Canadian players involved in it as well.
Brad, you've been compared in terms of style and size to John Volpe of the BC Lions, and obviously he's made quite a hit for himself in the CFL. Would you dream of doing the same thing if the opportunity were there?
If the opportunity were there, of course I'd dream of doing the same thing. That's been a dream of mine to play in the CFL ever since I can remember. So just being mentioned in the same breath as John Volpe is a big honor. But we'll wait and see. I think if Queens can take care of this game this weekend, I think that'll take care of itself.
Were your dreams showing you in green and white, Brad?
The green and white and black and silver. I think everybody that grows up in Saskatchewan wants to play for the Riders. I don't think anybody else around the league would be upset if I said that, but wherever I get the opportunity, that's where I'm going to go. It doesn't matter.
Alex, you may be called a kind of prototypical CFL player too, as a linebacker who isn't quite 6 feet tall but has the other size necessary to play. Do you think of yourself as a CFLer in the future?
I don't know. I haven't given much thought about it. Right now, I'm just playing, year by year, and if things happen, it's just icing on top of the cake. I'm going to school right now, and get my degree, and if it happens, it happens.
What might CFL expansion do to the Canadian university programs that you fellas are in right now? Could they be casualties as well?
Well, I don't know. I think that the CIU is doing well right now, and there's a lot of traction with a lot of young high school athletes, and I think it would be just as strong. Everyone still wants to play football at a university level, and from then on, people go into different careers.
Brad, do you think there would be a link between CFL expansion and the success of Canadian university football?
Well, that I don't think would be much affected, because I don't think the CIU is really a breeding grounds for the professional teams. I think that the CIU more gives people an opportunity to achieve an education and participate at a high level of sport. So I really don't think that'll affect the CFL as much as the import to non-import ratio will.
All right, let's give you guys a chance to plug your own game on Saturday. Alex, why will St. Mary's beat Brad's Queens Gales?
The number of reasons. We're a team. We have a good unity on this team. We're quick. We have a very good balance defensively and offensively, and I think this is going to be a defensive battle, and I think we're going to be on top this Saturday.
Brad, you probably don't want to get any closer to Alex than you are right now in Saturday's game, but it might happen. Give me the pitch for Queens.
I agree it's going to be a defensive battle. I think our defense is going to show better against their defense than their offense against ours. I think we're going to give them a good try. I don't think Queens has played as well as we can yet. I think we will this weekend.
Brad, you don't always play in stadiums this big or in front of crowds that'll be as big as Saturday's. Is it a big lift to come to the championship game and realize that it's being played in a world-class facility with a big crowd expected?
It's always fantastic to get into a facility like this, but regardless, field's still 65 yards wide and 110 yards long. I don't think what happens on the field will really be affected by what's going on in the stands. It's still great to come to a facility like this, but I don't think it's going to have much effect on the actual game itself.
Yeah, Alex, you had a packed house at Husky Stadium last weekend. How many of those people are going to be here?
Well, there's going to be a lot of fans here from Halifax. They're really excited, and they're all taking a plane and coming down, driving, even taking the cab. I know one person.
Guys, good luck to both of you Saturday and also tonight at awards night. And if the CFL exists and you dream to play in Regina or San Antonio, good luck in your pro careers.
Thank you very much.